Welcome. Good evening. There's an awful lot of spiritual misinformation floating around, which is no doubt one of the reasons that spirituality has acquired such a bad rap as being an activity for flakes and space cadets and general wackos. Most spirituality is couched in terms of upgrading your experience, of moving from some lower way of being with your experience to some higher way of being with the experience. It's like learning to win at poker, or learning to learn. So in most spirituality is couched in terms where if you develop some technique or you indulge in some particular form of behavior for more or less protracted period, usually it's going to be to your advantage to do so. And in actual fact, it turns out that this is all hogwash. It's just not actually like that. Because the spiritual problem is not related to poor quality of experience, and the spiritual solution is not related to improved quality of experience. Spirituality consists of one thing and one thing alone, which is this reality that is right here, this actuality. If you misunderstand it and misinterpret it, you will be confused, you will suffer, you will think things are a certain way and behave as if they are that way, and typically this leads to a lot of confusion and awkwardness and frustration and lack of fulfillment and so on and so forth. Whereas if you come to see what this actually is, if you come to see what is actually going on here, you discover that there are no problems. There is actually, all the human problems that are held to exist don't actually exist, believe it or not. It's just actually not like that. And it's not a matter of changing anything within experience, it's not a matter of improving anything within experience, it's just a matter of seeing what this actually is. And when you see what this actually is, you discover it's a condition which is amazing, is astounding, is transcendental, and you are it. You are beyond suffering. You are beyond failure. You are beyond dissatisfaction. Which is quite different than most spiritual programs, which are aimed at improving something, fixing something, or learning to do something, or getting a better mode of functioning or something like that. You don't need to improve functioning. You can be a really mediocre person, a really mediocre functioner, and basically, a failure or anything, and become spiritually realized. You don't need to become Superman or woman to actually attain actual liberation. Another thing that is put forth in most spirituality, liberation, realization, all of these things, enlightenment, it's always in capital letters, and it's this amazing thing somewhere way out there, and 3 people in history have gotten it, and you've got Jesus Christ and Buddha and Ramana Maharshi and of course Dafri John and a few others who were like, they're it, and the rest of us are just basically shit out of luck. I mean, that's not going to happen to you or me, right? But that's not true either. It's not like that, because what this is actually very easy to see. It's very easy to come to understand what this is, and it's in that simple seeing, in that simple revelation, is the totality of enlightenment, the totality of liberation. Any being that has ever become realized, has ever become enlightened, has done so simply by seeing what this is. What it already is, what it is right here, right now. You're seeing it right now. This is it. This is what all the fuss is about. the big kicker, the big issue is that what this is not what you think it is. Period. What this is unthinkable. So no matter how sophisticated or elaborate or amazing or astounding your ideas about it are, they're wrong. Because no idea about this can be correct, cannot be accurate, because this is unthinkable. Just by its very nature, it happens to be unthinkable, because it doesn't resolve down to coherence. It doesn't resolve down to anything you could actually capture as a thought. Anything you can think about is a fantasy. Pure and simple. It's very easy. And think about your dreams, like the dream you had last night. In your dreams, what happens? Well, all kinds of things seem to happen, right? You're wandering around and you're talking to people and you're doing things, or you're flying, or whatever's going on. It seems to be happening, right? And yet, every single aspect of that interpretation of your dream is inaccurate, is a fantasy, is untrue. Because there were no people there. There were no things there. There was not even any space or time there. You wake up and it was like, where's the space that appeared in your dream? There's nowhere. Where was the time that appeared in your dream? Where were the other people? Where's the environment? Where's the events? Where's the circumstances? Not there at all. So all these ideas we have that our interpretation, our narrative of what happens in the dream. What did you dream about last night? Well, I dreamed about this, that, and the other. Just didn't exist at all. And you weren't even in the dream. You didn't exist at all in the dream. And exactly the same thing is true right here, right now. Exactly the same thing is true right here, right now. What is here right now is apparition, pure and simple. You can't say what that is, you can't say how it is, any more than you can in a dream. How does a dream appear? Right? It's a mystery, it's a miracle. Just poof, there it is, just bang, full blown. And here this is, all of it in this incredible detail. And our bodies are here, and all of this event is happening, and we have space and time and all these things going on. You know, and you ever notice how when you go to sleep at night, all this just goes poof? Just like a dream does when you wake up. When you wake up from a dream, it's instantly it doesn't like even fade away. It just goes, it's just like instantly nowhere. It's instantly nothing. And when you go to sleep, the same thing happens here. When you're asleep, where's your daily life? Where's your body? Where's what you did yesterday? Where's your history? You know, it's nowhere. It's gone. It's just completely insubstantial. And it's just as insubstantial right here when you're in it. Just like a dream is just as insubstantial when you're in it as it is after it's over. And when you go lucid in a dream, if you've had that experience, this is what happens. You actually see that, oh, this is a dream. There's nothing actually here. It's all just appearance. And then what does that feel like? It feels liberated. It feels like, hey, who gives a shit? It's just a dream. Who cares? The monster's chasing me. What a hoot. That's great, you know? I'm about to get shot. Fabulous. What fun. You know, this is great. Let's enjoy this. Because it doesn't matter anymore, because you see, it's just a dream. It's just an apparition. And exactly the same thing is true right here, right now. It's relatively easy to see that fact. You're seeing it right now. You always have. Look how slippery the present moment is. Everything that happens right now has never happened before. It's never going to happen again. You've never seen exactly what you're seeing right now. And you're never going to see it again. And even as you're seeing it right now, it's already disappearing utterly and completely, forever. I mean, this is very... And yet we say, oh no, this is solid. This is persistent. This is an objective world. Objective world's a thought. What you have is a field of flow of experience, which is entirely and absolutely slippery, absolutely unresolvable as anything, absolutely incoherent. You can't really pin down what anything actually is. It's easy, and yet you can effortlessly have all sorts of thoughts about it. You know, we can all spin these incredibly intricate narratives about what's going on and what's happening here and who I am and what I'm doing here and what blah blah blah. But it's all just fabricated into existence in the present moment. Just poof. Just like in a dream. Same thing in a dream. In a dream, you're there, You ever notice you can start a dream and you can have a history in the dream where you know what happened the last 3 years, and yet you just started dreaming? You ever notice that? You ever experience that? Sort of retroactive history being flashed back from the present moment. So here you are, right here, right now, and you know where you had dinner, you know what you did this afternoon, you know what you did this morning, you know what you felt like when you got up and all. But you're knowing that right now, right? Where's this morning? It's nowhere. Where's dinner? It's nowhere. Where's anything other than this apparition? It's nowhere. Just like tomorrow is nowhere. This is all self-evident. Everyone knows this, but everyone says, "Oh yeah, but come on, get real. This is a real world. You know, come on, it's persistent. It's solid. You know, it has history. It has." And yet, is it? Is it? So we have the very strange fact that we all intimately can experience this amazing slippery actuality, and yet we tend to be addicted to our version of it, our narrative, our interpretation. We feel it. We feel who we are. We feel the truth of our world. We feel the stuck in our lives. We feel trapped in our cause and effect and trapped in our history. But that feeling is actually being supplied by you. It's nowhere in your actual experience. It's nowhere to be found. It is an interpretation that you actively supply. Exactly like your narrative and interpretation in a dream is what you actively supply. The dream is just like it's like, oh, go to a movie. How about a movie? Movies are great. In a movie you go and what happens in a movie? It's just patterns of light on a screen. Just patterns of light on a screen, that's all. And yet you can get all worked up, and there's the hero, and there's the love interest, and there's the this and the that, and you get all torqued up about it. It's just patterns of light on a screen. There's nothing. It's the emptiest, ghostliest shell of apparition. Just like this is right here, this present moment. It's incredibly detailed, granted. There's incredible information, incredible depth of flavors, of experiential qualities presenting in the field of vision, all these lights and colors and visual textures and shapes, and in the field of hearing, all of these different frequencies and volumes and so on. In stereo, living stereo, and and sensation, of course. This is an amazing field of tingling, all different sort of amazing ranges of sensations that we interpret as coming from our bodies. In the field of thought, there's just whole universes seeming to appear, and so on and so forth. So this incredible density of information. But if you look at it, it's all exactly the same way. It's this essentially insubstantial, instantaneous, sparkling fluctuation of tingling energy. Light is instantaneous tingling energy. Sound is instantaneous tingling energy. Sensation is instantaneous tingling energy. Thought is instantaneous tingling energy. It's all is here. And there's this amazing magician of intelligence that can look at this amazing spectrum of tingles, amazing spectrum of sparkles, and turn it into your life, turn it into history, turn it into the objective world that's existed for 5 billion years, turned it into this, that, and the other, with incredible conviction, with incredible impact and seeming authority. But you can't find any of it. All you can find is this instantaneous tingle in the present moment. You can't find anything other than your experience right now. And that doesn't resolve into anything coherent. It has endless implication, all of these patterns and all that. It must be about something, meaning something, right? But they all just come together. What you're seeing now, you weren't seeing a moment ago, you weren't seeing 5 minutes ago. You're not going to be seeing it in 5 minutes or ever again. It's this amazing continual stream of innuendo and suggestion of all these patternings that seemingly imply so much, but they never would settle down into coherence. They never settle down into actual stability or repeatability. Just like in a dream. Same thing. It's very easy to notice reality as it is, actuality, the actuality of your experience. But for most of us, it's very hard to let go of our unreality. We tend to be addicted to our narrative. We're addicted to our version of things. We're addicted to our interpretation, our worldview, our definition of who I am and what I'm doing here, what's happening to me. We have this whole, essentially, encyclopedic narrative of, this is my life. And where does it exist? Does it exist out here? It exists in your imagination. It exists in memory. Memory is imagination. Memory happens in real time. Your memory of what happened yesterday is happening right now. It's not like you go back to some yesterday and you're there. You create a fiction, a fantasy right now, and you tell yourself that, oh, yesterday was kind of like this, and then you create this fiction, and I'm remembering yesterday. And then effortlessly, we feel it's real. Yesterday was like that. That is yesterday. It's not. It just plain isn't. It's this right here. And this right here is very strange. It's very miraculous. You can't say what it is. It's entirely transcendental in the sense that it transcends definition. It transcends analysis. It transcends being resolved into coherence. You can't actually pull any circumstance into a wholeness, an entityness that you can actually say and see what it is. Because everything's too slippery, everything too transient, everything is too spotty in terms of the range of characteristics it presents continually. I mean, try this one. Take something really simple and obvious, like your face in the mirror. You see your face in the mirror every day. So you're very, very familiar with your face in the mirror. But what do you look like? What exactly do you look like? Can you pull that into some kind of coherent whole that is stable and concrete and consistent? The face in the mirror is just an endless rainbow of suggestion and innuendo, and you notice this and you notice that, and sometimes you look at yourself and you think you're this, and sometimes you think you're that, and Same true of any experience, every experience, and it's very easy to notice that that's the case. And in terms of this yoga, the astounding fact is simply noticing that that is the case is the path to absolute realization. Nothing else. No fancy stuff. You don't need to raise the kundalini or learn to meditate or learn to do an impossible yoga posture or change your name to some Hindu name or wear funny clothes or learn a secret handshake. It's not, none of that stuff is relevant. You can do all that if you want, but it's just a way to pass the time. It's just lifestyle choices and entertainment. But it won't actually get you anywhere in terms of discovering what you are, discovering the intrinsic, amazing transcendence that you actually are, which happens to be completely liberated, so of course that discovery is liberating. just like when you go lucid in a dream. You go lucid in a dream and all of a sudden you're liberated. You're free of the dream. Who cares? The dream no longer holds you, no longer binds you, because you see it's not substantial. It's not actually there. You're not actually in it. It has no causal impact on anything. It's just a field of suggestion, of innuendo, of apparition that seems to imply, all sorts of content, but there's nothing actually there. Just like a movie. A movie is a pattern of light. There's nothing actually there. There's no heroes, there's no villains, there's no guns going off, there's no, hearts being broken. It's just patterns of light on a screen. That's all. So that's a little bit about our situation. And we can talk about that if you'd be interested.
Peter?
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned coherence,
Mhm.
and it seems that the mind wants order, it wants a sense of things
Mhm.
relevant.
Mhm.
And I'm having some flashes back to early childhood where that, however that takes place, recollection of how, some intimations of how that rose in this particular mind.
Mhm.
It's obviously very deep. It has to do with survival. It has to do
Mhm.
with what what is what needs to know to get by at whatever family and culture.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's sort of like an overlay on the mind. It's a set of parameters, a set of definitions and
Mhm.
interpretations.
Well, it's not so much an overlay on the mind; it's the mind's nature to do that. The mind's function is to do that. The mind's function is to analyze, to sort things out, to try to find patterns, and then to try to extrapolate on those patterns for personal advantage, of as what it understands as survival or achievement, or finding food or finding companionship or whatever. Fitting into the social matrix, all this, fitting into the tribe, all these things. The mind is a functionality which is, very strongly biased to do so. And of course, in a certain sense, this is what we're up against. And that functionality is not in itself a problem. It's believing that the mind's analyses are true and accurate that's the problem. There's nothing wrong with the mind finding patterns. There's nothing wrong with the mind naming things, with the mind sorting things out, with the mind interpreting things. There's nothing wrong with interpretation. It's not like you need to learn to be a zombie and just sit and be a vegetable. There's nothing wrong with the mind's functioning as finding patterns. Just see what that actually is, and see that the patterns that the mind finds are essentially hypothetical. They're hypotheses.
In I'm just assuming, or maybe asking, in that whole process of delineation or discrimination, the radiant nature, radiant presence,
Right.
is, because as you were saying, that once something is taken as true, one lives on that basis, and a whole series of emotions is generated.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's
Yeah.
that which seems to have the function to obscure the radiant.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. I mean, not necessarily by design. It's not necessarily that its purpose is to obscure it, but it certainly has that effect by and large. It's falling into an interpretation and then living as if that interpretation was true. It's very much like when you watch a movie and you get sucked into a movie or sucked into a TV show. You're watching TV. TV is just a little screen with little dots of light flickering on it. That's all it is. And yet you can get sucked into seeming programming that's implied by those patterns, and you're just off. You're off and running, and you start to react emotionally and intellectually to some degree as if those implications were objectively true. And again, this is not in itself a problem. It's not like the thought is really a problem. The problem is not seeing that thought is just thought. because thinking happens in the context of something that is, let's just say in the context of actuality, which entirely transcends thought. In other words, thought is a very small subsystem of the field of your being, the field of your experience. And when you see that, thought stops being a problem. Thought stops being entrapping. You don't need to stop thinking in order to be free of being entrapped by thought. You just need to see that thought is just thought. And you can see very directly and self-verifyingly the really prime fact about thought, which is that no thought can be accurate. It's not like most thoughts are inaccurate. It's much stronger than that. No thought can be accurate because there exists no coherent objects that could be thought about.
The undefinability of anything.
Yeah, exactly. It's like thinking about shapes in a cloud. You can think about the shapes in the cloud all you want, but the shapes, the cloud doesn't have those shapes. The cloud is shaped the way it's shaped, which is beyond thinkability. The cloud is too complex and too nebulous and too, well, literally nebulous, and too continually changing, and too subtle and refined to pin down exactly what its shape is. And so you look at, oh, that cloud looks like a lion, Well, yeah, it may kind of suggest a lion, and then it evokes the thought of a lion, and then a chain of associations in your mind, imagination about lions. But the cloud doesn't look like a lion. It doesn't look like anything. It looks like itself, and you can't say what that is. You can't pin down exactly what shape a cloud is. You can't pin down exactly what shape anything is. Even as you are experiencing, we're just talking about shape now, which is just a small parameter of the visual field typically, but we could be talking about any experiential parameter of the way we, objectify our field of experience. Nothing has a particular shape that you can find. You can generalize and say, well, like I'm seeing you, and so I can say, well, your shape, as I see you now, I can sort of imagine an outline around your body sitting there and say, well, your shape is that. But I have to imagine that because there's no outline around you. The edges of your body are fuzzy, and the shape is different. As my eyes shift around, the perspective actually shifts. I move my head a quarter of an inch, and all of a sudden your whole shape has changed. So what shape are you? It's meaningless. I can't be resolved into a specific answer to that question. What shape are you? Any more than what shape is the cloud can be resolved into a specific answer. But thought pretends it can. Thought pretends, oh, this is a cup, and then pretends it knows what that is, and it creates this caricature of a thing called a cup, and then thinks about cups, which is fine. That's what thought does. There's no problem that thought should do that. But as that's happening, this actuality, this experiential actuality, completely transcends anything you can think about it. And you can also know that, even as you're thinking about it. So in other words, the fact that thought is happening, thought happens here, but thought is a small phenomenon, and experience is a vast field. And even as you're thinking, you're having direct experience, which is not a thought. It's beyond thought.
Not to get too psychological, but trying my best to understand myself and understand the relative aspects of the conditioning and metaphysics and so forth. It's we're unfavorable, unhappy, less than ideal experiences with parents and so forth, and the mind is exposed. You even automatically or subconsciously looking to others over the years to try and resolve that.
Mm-hmm.
The real resolution would be in the direct seeing or direct perception of radiance or emptiness.
Yes.
Which is, by definition, you could call it love because it's infinitely interrelated.
Yes.
That would be
precisely.
The true healing.
Yes. And then you discover that the actual condition completely transcends and essentially invalidates the apparent conditions that were traumatic historically and psychologically, and also the actual condition, the way in which the actual condition is what it is entirely non-problematic. It's entirely fulfilling. So any problematic aspects that seem to present with the misinterpretations that were traumatic when you were an infant, what have you, it become invalidated or become relegated to jumping to conclusions, which is in fact what they were.
Right, that's right.
Innocent jumping. It's not like you did it on purpose.
Right. The major.
Yeah. And this can be seen because the radiance is right here, right now. In fact, nothing other than radiance is right here, right now. So this is seeable. For those of you that don't know my elaborate terminology, radiant presence is a name that I've coined for this that is here, this tingling, this sparkling that experience actually consists of, the substance of experience. So in your field of vision, it's what we call light. In your field of hearing, it's what we call sound. In your field of thought, it's what we call thought or mind stuff or whatever, so on and so forth. In the field of sensation, I guess touch we call it sensation. But if you look across the board at all of the actual instantaneous energies that are present as you experience in real time, right, in the present moment, because there's no other time that your experience is present, of course, you will see that it all consists of this hyper-fine, hyper sort of rapid seeming tingling or sparkling, or you can't say exactly what it is. You can one of the most direct ways to see it is if you close your eyes and look at just look at what appears in your field of vision when your eyes are closed. You'll see an endless field of seemingly tiny little sparkles and tingles that sort of group together more or less loosely into various degrees of patterning. But you can't actually resolve any of the tingles, you can't actually resolve any of the patterns. It's all very fluid and very unresolvable, so you better put it. And if you look at any portion of your experience, once you familiarize yourself with that kind of dynamism, you will discover exactly the same thing. If you look at what sensation consists of, like the feeling of your butt on the chair, or the feeling of your clothes on your body, or whatever, you'll see it consists of an extremely rapid sort of a tingling or sparkling or dynamism. And light is the same way, sound is the same way, thought is the same way. Thought is maybe difficult to look at because it's so tenuous in its texture, it's so ghostly, let's say. And yet thought has a substance, thought has a presence. Something is present when you're thinking. That's how you're thinking, because thought is present. And you can actually experience what is present, substantially what is present when thought is present. And you can actually experience the substance of thought the same way you experience the substance of vision, or the substance of sensation, or the substance of any experience. And I believe you'll find ultimately that it's all essentially the same. I mean, it presents itself as infinitely differentiated, but it's all essentially the same dynamism, the same unfindability, the same absolute differentiation. I mean, there's so much information present in any portion of the field of experience, inconceivable. But I call this the actuality of this that is present as what we call experience, or your being, or your field of your experience. I call that radiant presence, which is a kind of a nice term. It sums it up rather well, because it is certainly present. It is obviously and undeniably present. The fact that it is present gives us a whole sense of reality, of actuality. How do you know you exist? Oh, because this is present. It's self-evident. It's so obvious you wouldn't even necessarily think of it or notice it. It's like a fish noticing water, or something perhaps. But yeah, there is presence. Certainly there's presence, undeniably. And the presence always presents as an inconceivable range of characteristics. Field of vision is always full. Field of hearing is always full. Even when you go to sleep, your field of vision is full, your field of hearing is full. You start dreaming, your field of vision is full, your field of hearing is full. So this presence is always radiant. It's always showing up as experiential characteristics. And that's all that there is here. That's the truth. That's the bottom line. There's nothing. There's radiant presence, period. And all the rest is just interpretation, fantasy, imagination, which of course is radiant presence. Because intelligence is radiant presence. Radiant presence isn't just inert. It's not just mechanical. It's not like just someone left a light running. It's an intelligent presence, a sentient presence, a conscious presence. And this inherent consciousness that this astounding substantiality is, spontaneously generates all this amazing analysis and so on that we experience as our interpretations, our thoughts, our, all the range of the sort of subjective phenomena that we, take so for granted.
It's so persistent. It's so tremendously persistent.
Yeah, it's constant. It's unstoppable.
Like if your whole narrative is like a bad dream that you don't even want to be in, it still is persistent for some reason, It's like, well, it seems like you should be able to kind of say, snap out of it, let's do something different here.
Well, you can, and it's possible to. But the main thing that keeps us locked in our narratives is our fighting with them, our resistance to them, our struggling with them. We either like things or don't like things, and if we like them, we're pulling on them, and if we don't like them, we're pushing on them. And if you can find a neutral point where you're just with it, that's when things can open up. Because, and also it's also a very powerful fact. Turns out to be a very powerful fact that the narrative doesn't have to stop. You don't have to stop having the narrative. You just have to see that it is a narrative. Basically, it's hypothetical. It's like, if you're reading a cartoon in a newspaper or something, you know that it's a cartoon. You know that the story there is fictional. You don't get too torqued up about it most of the time. On the other hand, you read a headline, and you might think, oh my God, 50,000 people were slaughtered in such and such this incredible tragedy. And then you might get all worked up about it. But there's no more actual content in the headline than there is in the comic. It's the getting sucked in and pushing and pulling on it that gives it impact.
Well, I have a question about that.
Sure, of course.
So, in the cartoon, it's somebody's creation that they just wrote down, for entertainment. But if you read about 50,000 people getting slaughtered and put out by nerve gas, I don't really understand what you're implying. Are you stating that didn't happen, or that you're just?
It's a question of your experience. What happens in your experience happens in your experience. So if you say you're on the internet and you go to your homepage and it says, big disaster, tornado in the Midwest, and 50 children were killed or whatever, you're not seeing 50 children killed. You're not seeing a tornado. You're seeing patterns of light on a computer screen.
That's right.
And if you were seeing a dead child with a tornado disappearing over the horizon, you're seeing a pattern of light. You're hearing patterns of sound. And you might say, oh, this pattern of light is a dead child. Well, I'm not saying it's not a dead child, but what is a dead child? What's a live child? What are you? What is this? And the whole point is to see what this actually is. It's not a matter of denying these sub-interpretations, but these sub-interpretations are partial. So it's, in other words, let me think of a good way to put this. Okay, let's say, in terms of consensus reality, you could say, well, here we are, we're sitting in this room, you're really there, I'm really here, we're having this conversation, there's all these gaudy pictures around us, and we're and so on and so forth. So all of that, whatever you would say about what's happening here, is true as far as it goes. But then you have to look at what are the elements that are just designated actually. So when I say we're here, what is here? If I say you're there, what is you? What is there? If I say I'm here, what is me? What is here? If I say this room, we're in this room, what does in mean? What does a room mean?
I understand.
And this is not just playing games with words. It's much more profound than that. It's coming down to seeing what experience actually is, and seeing how our interpretations are overlaid over experience, and those interpretations are always partial.
It's eluding me what you're saying right now. Like the consensus reality seems so strong.
Yes, true.
And like I can hear what you're saying and intellectually grasp it, but I'm not, like I don't have that, like have the experience of, my experience is partial reality. You're there, I'm here.
Okay.
And
well, that interpretation is there, but so you're seeing me, right? You're actually seeing your field of vision. You're not seeing me.
Right.
You're seeing, a sort of a more or less horizontal, fuzzy-edged oval of light with all sorts of colors and stuff in it. That's what you're seeing. Then you're interpreting certain portions of a certain set of shapes and colors as being me.
And then I'm probably ascribing qualities to you that I don't really know whether you have or not.
Yeah, maybe. And sound, you're hearing my voice, but you're also hearing the hum of the air conditioner, and you're hearing when someone moves in their chair, you're hearing all this. You're not hearing those things, you're hearing your entire field of sound. That's what you're hearing. If you took a tape recorder and you record what's happening in this room, and you play back that tape recorder on a computer that will show the waveforms of the audio that was recorded, the sound of someone moving in their chair and the sound of someone's voice doesn't look any different. It's all just sound. The recorder doesn't know a voice from a rustling of the chair. And you don't actually either. You supply that in interpretation.
I don't know it, I supply it.
Yeah.
In interpretation.
Yeah. Well, when I say you don't know it, that's not a very clear way of putting it. What I mean is that when you're, let's go back to vision. When you're seeing your full field of vision, all you're seeing is colors, and light. You're not seeing things. And then you're.
And there's depth, or is that?
Well, there's the visual the light phenomena that are interpreted as depth, let's say. Like, for example, binocular vision, you can tell how far something is because of the way your eyes converge. If something's close, your eyes have to go in, and so on that. So you have a take on, the relative degrees of focus and all that sort of stuff. But all of that is basically just light information. There's no narrative, there's no labels. In your field of vision, there's no label here on this portion of this shape of light saying, this is me. There's no labels. You look at you see your knee, you see my knee, there's no label that says that's yours, that's me. The light that's showing up from your knee and the light that's showing up from my knee is identical in terms of its subjectivity or objectivity. It's just light. And yet, the imagination can effortlessly come in and say, no, this is my name, that's your name. But that's not in the light. That's in thought, in imagination. And it's possible to see that. It's possible to see that all of your interpretations exist in imagination. It's not that they're wrong, it's not that they're untrue, it's that they exist only in imagination. They don't exist in the sensory information. They're implied by the sensory information, they're based in the sensory information. So in other words, your field of vision, you see all these shapes, And in my imagination, I can effortlessly trace around your body and say, oh, this is a human being, this is a cushion, so on and so forth, effortlessly, obviously, instantaneously. But it's not in the field of vision to do that. It's in the imagination, sort of the data processing of the field of vision, which doesn't happen in vision. It happens over here somewhere, wherever that is. I mean, obviously it's not spatial, but they're a different phenomenon. They're not actually overlaid. They're not actually one thing. So there's an implication. That it's viable to have the interpretations we have based on our sensory information, but the interpretations are interpretations, and they're always partial. In other words, no matter how sophisticated an interpretation you have of something, you can't capture the totality of the actuality. No matter how well you know someone, you can't ever know all there is about them.
Yeah.
No matter how well you know anything, you can't know every aspect of it.
Right, so stop there, so I'm with you up to right there.
Okay, that's a good place to be.
I mean, but
So if what's actually there in your experience is more than your interpretation, you are seeing it. So what's with all the stuff that is being left out of your interpretation?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's up with that?
I don't know.
What does that imply?
I don't know.
Well, that's good.
It implies that I don't know.
Well, that's good. I don't know is a really good thing. I don't know is truth. You don't know. And that's not a statement of failure. That's actually a statement of success. Because you're engaged with actuality. Actuality is what is. Actuality isn't what you interpret. You don't need to interpret it for it to be actual. It just needs to be present. And all of a sudden you're in presence. And no one knows what presence is. Here's presence. It's completely obvious that there's presence here, right? This is present. Your experience is present, right? Do I have agreement here, more or less? Without splitting hairs. And yet, what is this presence? What is it? What is it? How is this present? There's no way you can answer that question, right? It's completely obvious, right? Completely self-evident. Experience is present. And yet, even what that is completely unanswerable. How it is, anything about it it's a big question mark. It's a big I don't know. But more than that, it's a big exclamation point, because it is. It's real. This presence is real. It doesn't need to be analyzed. It doesn't need to be figured out to be real. And that's powerful.
I can notice sometimes like that the whole totality of my thoughts. There's nothing true in them.
Good.
I mean, it's like absolutely nothing.
Sure.
But then they just keep going, and I believe
them.
them.
Yeah, they'll keep going. Well, this is what happens.
I believe them again. Right after I notice that.
Yeah, but this happens. We have a lifelong habit of believing our thoughts, of getting sucked into them.
Yeah.
And when we start playing with this, when we start exploring this yoga, we begin to notice. We begin to one degree or another. We begin to notice. Wait a minute. There's something else going on here. There's something more here. Wow. And then typically there's a little bit of, wow, cool, and then bang, we're sucked back into our thoughts. And this is a cycle. This is what this yoga looks like. You have a period of seeing, a period of, wait a minute, wow, what's this? This is really interesting. And then typically we're right back into the thick of it, into our usual crap, right?
Yes.
but that's everyone knows this. This is normalcy. This is what the yoga looks like. But you see, every time you have a bit of seeing, every time you have a bit of noticing your actual condition, it builds, it accumulates, cumulative, because this noticing is actual, it's real, so it has power. It's not just another thought that has to compete with the other thoughts. It's more than that. You're looking at actuality, and actuality trumps thoughts any day of the week. And so every time you have a contact with the genuineness of this, wow, I don't know, but here it is, it's like making a deposit into your bag. and then you get caught up in your stuff and whatever, for 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 weeks or 5 years, and then you have another moment of, wow, check this out. Something you're just wow, this is amazing, and that's another deposit in your bank, and it adds to what was there before. And it may be slow or fast or whatever, but sooner or later you're building up a lot of capital in your bank account, and eventually, as this continues, these periods of noticing will happen deeper, they'll happen longer, they'll happen more often, and eventually you'll sort of, the seesaw will tilt, and you'll be in noticing all the time. Noticing will be your normalcy, and occasionally there'll be these thoughts and getting caught up in things, but normalcy will be the default instead of the other way around.
Sometimes it's almost like, I'm going along and all of a sudden there's like this tornado of thought and emotion that takes over completely for 5 days, and then I'm like,
Sure.
Jesus Christ, what just happened?
Sure, oh yeah, sure. Well, we all know this, it's just normal human
Okay, well, I'm
life.
looking it up, because to me it's like, what's wrong with me? Why does this keep happening?
Well, what's wrong with you is what's wrong with everyone.
Oh,
So.
okay. Well, that's, okay, good. That's good
I mean,
to
more
know.
or less, I'm guessing.
So, what about these 15 kids in Oklahoma who died in
What about them?
tornado? Do they exist? Did they exist? Did they die?
I don't know. That's their problem.
Tell me more.
What about the 100 million bacteria that I killed by walking on them on the way walking back here for dinner? Did they exist? Did they die? I don't know. It's their problem. And I don't mean to be cold. When I say it's their problem, I mean that very literally. Human sentiment about everything, all human sentiment is based on human worldviews, human interpretations. And it's not like that's pointless or useless, or again, not that it's completely untrue, but it's very partial. So, we hear about, 20 people were killed, and 15 of them were children, and all of a sudden that makes it worse. Why? It's not worse because they're children, but from a human sentimental point of view, it is, which is a partial view. And it's a partial view that most of us share, but it's not. But there's more going on. There's more than that. That's not the whole story. To really understand what happens when there's a tragedy and 50 people are killed, or say there's a forest fire and 100,000 trees are destroyed that have lived for hundreds of years. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, who knows? What does forest fires mean? What do trees mean? What is life? What is death? Is death bad? You have to know what death is to know if it's bad. From a human sentimental point of view, death is bad. From a human sentimental point of view, death to kids is really bad. But from an objective point of view, what is death? Well, yeah. And so is it bad? Can you really answer that question? I can say, if it was in my power to prevent those kids dying, perhaps I would do so, right? But here, days later, seeing words on my computer screen, it's a koad.
I think
To just fall into a simple knee-jerk, oh, this is terrible, how could this happen, is a little simplistic.
it's interesting that this is really off the subject, but it used to be that either you were there and you were, when the tornado hit, you were there, so you knew
Sure.
about it, or you didn't.
Yeah.
But now
Sure,
you can be
pre-media
thousands
days.
of miles away and see it on a computer screen and have this
Yeah.
intense emotional response to it,
Yeah.
even though it's not even part of your.
Yeah, but this is part and
Experience.
parcel of human evolution. There was a time before there was language when all experience was entirely local. If you didn't see it, you didn't know about it because no one could tell you about it. And then primitive language came in, and all of a sudden someone could tell you about something you didn't see. And that's a biggie. But of course there's this huge time delay and a huge exaggeration and misinterpretation delay. So basically the internet back 10,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago was just sort of a lazy rumor mill that percolated around randomly. And as our media has evolved and our language has evolved and our technology has evolved, now we have the internet and the news and the live video while it's happening of a shootout in Moscow or whatever, right? And it's like, whoa. But it's just more of the same. And suppose there was a shootout in Moscow 10,000 years ago and you lived in the hills of Nebraska or something. You didn't know about it. You're never going to know about it. How much does it matter? Right now, suppose there's a planet in some distant galaxy that's exploding, or let's say it's under attack by a totally malicious life form that just wants to inflict as much pain as possible on all the inhabitants of that planet, and they're succeeding. They're just massacring and torturing all of these people. But you can't see it. You can't know it. You know nothing about it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about that. Really think about it. It's like, so what's up with that? How does that work?
Mm-hmm. It's kind of almost the same as like how people get about politics.
Yeah.
The same as the planet.
It's exactly. And what we're talking about here is the difference between, or the relationship between, fantasy and actuality. And there is a difference. I mean, it's important to notice fantasy is actual, but it's actual fantasy. And the content of fantasy, the narrative of fantasy, the what fantasy pretends to be meaning or saying, is entirely nothing. What's real about fantasy is its existence. Anything it's saying or implying is completely unreal. The only thing real about anything is its existence. And its existence is this radiant presence that the entirety of your experience consists of right now, as it always has and always will. And fantasy occurs within that. Fantasy is a mode of radiant presence. But that's all its importance. Its importance is that it is, not what it's saying. Because it's just spinning partialities or gross exaggeration. Because actuality cannot be captured in an interpretation, period. No matter how detailed the news story is, it's not going to be the same thing as the fact. And to react as if it was is the doorway to madness, the doorway to complete insanity, which happens to be the normal human condition. Most people are just stone cold bonkers. And we don't know it because it's the normal human condition. Everyone else is, so we just think of it as normal. But everyone's walking around basically having fantasies and acting as if they're true. And that's the normal mode of human life, of human functioning, of human emotionality. Look at our politics. Look at go buy a People magazine or something. It's insanity. It's total insanity. And even things like so-called objective news stories, the tornado and this and that, is of the same ilk. Because it's so partial that you're creating fictions of events. But then typically if we don't recognize their fictions, we're just sucked into more insanity, sucked into more reactivity, sucked into more neurotic emotionality, and sucked into pain, suffering, delusion, bondage, karma, from a spiritual point of view. Whereas when you see actuality, you're free of all that. You're free of all of this misinterpretation. And it turns out that what this actually substantially consists of, what it is, the physics of it, what it actually is, what is here, is entirely unbounded, entirely unbounded, entirely transcendental. And that's all that is here, that's all that you are, that's all that your life is, that's all that the world is. And when you see that, this is the phenomenon that's called liberation or realization or enlightenment or all these other various
What
things.
does unbounded mean?
Well, you have to see it to know what it means. But there are no conditions or partialities or boundaries that limit it in any way. It's like let's think of a dream. The dream is unbounded. A dream might look like anything, but you can't say what it is. And it's not stuck in anything. It's not blocking anything. It's not being blocked by anything. It's just, you can't say what it is. Yeah, it's lovely, thank you.
You can thank her. She lets me know.
Well, thank you,
Lets me
Susan.
know.
I'm a chai junkie, I confess.
Feels like you can be free from misunderstanding even as it's happening.
Of course. Yeah, because we were talking about this partially earlier. Interpretation doesn't need to stop happening. Misinterpretation doesn't need to stop happening. You just need to see what it is. And then you're no longer trapped by it. You no longer react to it as if it was true. Because it's just interpretation. And the mind endlessly spins off these interpretations. You can't stop it. You're never going to stop your mind. It ain't going to happen. All these meditators that are sitting for 30 years trying to stop their mind, they're poor, good luck. Ain't going to happen.
Well, thought seems to have this trick of piggybacking on things, like making itself about what you're seeing directly, actually.
Yeah, it's very opportunistic.
Yeah.
It's very parasitic, sure.
I've noticed sometimes though, like, I'll suddenly notice something I'm thinking about and be like, why am I thinking about that? And stop. Because, it's completely there's no agency in it sometimes, it's just like, why am I thinking about Justin Bieber? Justin Bieber is, like, I don't even know what his music sounds like. He just, like, appears, when I'm in the checkout stands, and, so why would I be thinking about him? Yeah, like, I don't know.
No, exactly. And just because you happen to be thinking about something doesn't make it particularly important.
No.
You're thinking one thing, think of all the other things you could be thinking. And it's completely arbitrary that you happen to be thinking the one you're thinking. It's like, you overhear something or you hear someone, there's something happened but you haven't heard about it, you haven't read a news story, so you're not thinking about it, it's not in your world at all. So, and just because you are thinking about something, it's actually exactly in your world just exactly as much as something you're not thinking about and you never have thought about. It's just a thought. It's not anything. It's like me talking about 50,000 people being slaughtered or something in some horrible tragedy. Until I said that, you weren't thinking about it, and it wasn't in your world. And who cares? Who gives a shit? It's a joke.
I remember on Facebook seeing somebody saying something about they were thinking about Oklahoma City, which I had no knowledge of, and then I went to CNN and found out that there had been a tornado, but I didn't know if it was a bomb. I had no idea.
Of course. And suppose your internet was down and you hadn't looked at a computer for 2 days, how much would you be worrying about it? Yeah, it's just absolutely nothing.
Yeah, I'm not worried
So
about
just
it.
because something happens to pop up in your field of thought, it doesn't necessarily make it important. And this is another fallacy of interpretation. Interpretation reifies whatever it seems to be focusing on. The spotlight of its awareness is on. All of a sudden, that's like, oh wow, this is real. This really matters. This is important. And this makes up our personal drama. This makes up our life, really. But it doesn't actually, it's not our actual life. It's just the life that we think we're invested in, think we're involved in. It's our crazy life. Our actual life is this amazing infinite field of presence that is always right here. It never, what appears in this never repeats. It's absolutely instantaneously changing. You never experience the same thing twice, right? And what you're experiencing now instantaneously disappears. Things have absolutely no duration. Whatever you see, it's already gone and you're seeing something else, even as you see it. You could say the present disappears and becomes the past instantly. Continually, always. It's always been that way. It's just self-evident. It's completely obvious. It's so obvious we don't even think about it. But if you look at it, it's pretty trippy. It's pretty incredible. And that's all there actually is. It's just this instantaneous field that is continually being pulled out from under itself. And then there's that, and then there's all of the, sound and fury signifying nothing of our dramas and our interpretations and our stories and our content and our aspirations and what we love and what we hate and what we're hoping for and what we're dreading, and which is just like a soap opera. It's not real. You ever watch? I don't know if soap operas are even on TV anymore. When I was a kid, there were soap operas. They're this insane, pathetic, absurd, completely laughable, extreme, exaggerated situations whose only purpose is to try to tweak your emotions.
And if you didn't watch and 3 months later you turn it on again, it would be almost the
Yeah.
exact same
Yeah.
thought.
And it's completely fantasy. There's nothing there at all. There's no substance there at all. It's like cotton candy, It's just, there's nothing. And this is exactly what our lives are in actuality. Our human lives, the lives we get invested in and caught up in and stuck in and we grapple with so much and that we want to be free of and we dread and all this stuff. It's not our life. It's not the actuality of our life that all of that involvement is with. It's just simply this imaginary narrative and our addiction to it. Which fortunately is a small phenomena in a vast actuality. And simply seeing that is enough to disarm it. Simply seeing how small the imagination is and how vast the field of experience is enough. It's like seeing how small the field of vision is. The field of vision, here's your field of vision, right? This is it. I can draw my hands kind of around my field of vision right here. This is the picture. So that's the extent of it. It stops. That's all it is. And it's just here. So how big is it? Well, there's also a field of hearing. There's a field of sensation, which is also big. There's a field of taste and smell, which is also big. The field of thought, which is huge. Other subtle fields of energies we don't even have names for to qualify as sense fields. And they're all there. So how big is any one of these fields in the face of all the moreness that is present experientially? Experience is a vast actuality. And imagination and interpretation is just a small little bubble somewhere floating in there. And just seeing that's enough. You don't even need to stop. You don't need to even become sane. You can be the same wacko person you always have been, getting all tweaked up by your emotionalized misinterpretations. But all of that is just this tiny little bubble in this vast moreness, this vast, amazing I don't know-ness. It's that I don't know, but it's real, it's actual, it's concrete. And it's accessible. It's right here. In fact, it's not just accessible, you always are accessing it completely. You always experience all of your experience all the time. You're always experiencing your field of vision, you're always experiencing your field of sound, blah, 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 blah. As far out as you want to take it. You can't shut them off. You can't make them go away. They're just on all the time. So you're already always experiencing all of this actuality. And it really kind of puts this little bubble of imagination into perspective. If you see it and don't zoom in on it and let it let it be about everything.
It seems automatic, like
Yeah.
awareness will automatically focus
Yeah.
in.
It's an addiction, sure, yeah. It's like a TV. It's a perfect example. You ever notice you walk into a room, like say at an airport, you walk into a room and there's a TV on in the room, and the TV's just small and over there, and there's a lot in the room going on, maybe there's people there and a lot, but if you're not careful, your attention goes and you're just sucked into the TV. Just like that.
Is it?
Yeah, of course, it's exactly like that, in fact. It's a habitual addiction. Addiction to stimulation. Because because we get all toward most of our experience seems kind of, it doesn't seem to have a lot of impact because we like the high emotionality of our narrative and our reactivity and the things we get torqued up about. Whereas, you look outside and you see, well, it's a nice day, but not a particularly pretty day, and so there's all this light there, and it's just sitting there, and it's like, well, yeah, so what? And so you go sort of looking around for something a little more juicy, something that's, you can get worked up about. And it's just a habit. It's, it's a kind of a childish habit of wanting, more stimulation, wanting, more. Mommy, I want a new toy. The old toy's boring.
Actually, it's the opposite for me. It's like what I like the most is if I go outside and, my attention is totally captured by a beautiful rose bush.
Well, that's great.
And it's taken away from all that drama.
Well, that's good.
But, it's good.
But if the drama is there in a tug of war,
yes,
then there's some of that with that too.
Right.
So you're kind of again.
I get a break.
Yeah.
but yeah.
So yeah, as in terms of a strategy from the yogic point of view, the best way, if fighting your addiction it feeds it. Trying to get away from any mode of functioning actually strengthens it because you give it importance.
Mm-hmm.
The best way is to just look at what is elsewhere rather than look at what's elsewhere to get away from something. So just in other words, when you pushing on something, you're actually feeding it. You're giving it importance. If you let go of the pushing, just let it be there, and then just sort of gently look away and be with something else, but not to be away from this, but just do it anyway. Then you can sort of slip out the back door with a lot more gracefully and a lot more staying power. Because as long as you're trying to get away from something, you're actually pulling on it. You're actually orienting to it, and orienting to it is orienting to it. You may as well be sucked into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, that applies to all addictions.
And again, the problem with being sucked into it, the problem with having your news aggregator with 20 news feeds that have endless fascinating stories of the human condition.
No problem.
Not fight it, but to get sucked into it.
It's not intrinsically a problem.
Right.
It's only a problem if it disproportionately isolates you from the rest of your experience.
But what if it intensifies and gives you a joy in the normal experience?
Then that's great. That's great. There's no holds barred. Any experience is reality presenting itself. Any experience, including experience that is often categorized as problematic. but that's from a more immature point of view, where you're trying to extricate yourself from being with things immaturely. When you develop more maturity and you have less of a tendency to be entrapped by things, then you can savor the vitality in any presentation of energy.
Well, entrapment's a fine line.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. It's like art. It's like it's exactly like art. In fact, it is
exactly,
art.
Yeah.
It's the essence of art. So art, you may, when you have a more naive, immature appreciation of art, you may like things that are, beautiful or pretty, or I don't know what. I mean, I'm just, making this up. But then when you develop a more mature palate, a more mature appreciation, you can develop a broader, possibly, range of things where you can really see the vitality and the juiciness and the meaningfulness with even content that's very disturbing. In fact, you might seek out more disturbing art because it's more juicy. But again, from a mature point of view, then you're not entrapped by those things. You're not entangled or confused by those things. You can appreciate their power.
Well, you see the subtleties more, the intricacies.
Yeah, exactly so. It's really all about seeing the subtleties. I mean, the entire spiritual conundrum is about seeing the subtleties. Spiritual ignorance consists of not seeing the subtleties. Dealing with your experience in terms of gross overgeneralizations, oversimplification. And seeing the subtleties is exactly the vehicle to be with it as it is, more profoundly. And then at that point you're liberated from let's say the stupid implications of the oversimplification. Just to sum up this whole yoga in very simple terms, you could say there's more going on in the actuality of your experience than you think there is, or than you can think there is, and that more is profoundly powerful. And engaging with it and noticing that in fact you're already engaged with it is outside or beyond the context of your normal way of thinking about it, is very powerful and ultimately profoundly beneficial. And again, this is not to deny your thoughts or to try and shut down your thoughts or to try to fight with your thoughts. It's just outside of that, regardless. So you don't need to become sane. You don't need to even learn critical thinking. You just need to notice your experience. You don't need to, but it's possible to notice your experience beyond the realm of the thinkable. And notice that you'll discover very quickly that most of your experience is unthinkable. You actually can't think about most of your experience because it's too weird, it's too subtle, it's too refined, it's too whatever. And this turns out to be profoundly powerful and profoundly beneficial.
It also seems to have this quality that I would call like profoundly fulfilling.
Absolutely.
Like nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like,
sure. Well, there's a lot of ways to put that. In a lot of ways, it has been put in the highest spiritual literature. You discover that you are what you are is sustained by this. What you are has always been striving for this actuality, and you discover that not only are you intrinsically striving for it, you also always have it. So you always have that which you're striving for. You're completely not separated from that which you are striving for. There's no separation. There's no being cut off from anything. There's no impediment to your being. And these things, you discover these things just very intuitively, obviously, self-verifyingly. It's not a matter of needing to figure it out or think or understand it or anything. Even you just stumble upon it, and it's just so obvious that it conveys itself. At which point, of course, it just feels profoundly nourishing, profoundly entertaining, profoundly fulfilling, profoundly just rewarding in every way.
You could also say maybe meaningful, but not in a
Sure.
meaning to be something.
Sure, all that.
Inherently.
Yeah.
But this whole thing of thought is I find it real interesting that as far as I can tell, my brain, my thinking is just rattling on just like it ever does.
Sure.
And yet it doesn't seem to be at all in the way of noticing.
Of course not. Yeah, because
I thought they were. I thought the one precluded that.
Well, yeah, but this is a major fallacy. Our thoughts are in the way. Our thoughts are blocking. We have to shut down our thoughts or get away from our thoughts. None of that is true. It turns out, because in an ignorant point of view, we think our thoughts are about our experience. We think our thoughts ubiquitously include the whole field of experience. But it's not actually like that. When you really look at your actual experience, you discover every portion of your experience doesn't block any other portion. They all happen in their own dimensions. So your field of hearing does not block your field of vision. They happen concurrently in different dimensions. They don't get in each other's way. It's not like you hear a sound and all of a sudden the sound gets in the way of your seeing. And it turns out, surprisingly maybe, but in actuality it turns out thought is the same way. Thought and imagination happen in their own dimension. They don't actually block anything. They don't get in the way of anything. They don't even have anything to do with anything, even though they kind of opportunistically pretend to. And when you see this, when you discover this actuality, then your thought no longer impedes you. It's just another, voice in the chorus, so to speak. And it doesn't actually block any of the other voices. And so it doesn't impede access to the non-thought portions of your experience, because it's not in the way of it. It's over here. And your other experiences are over here, 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 and here, and here, forever. I mean, this is all sort of metaphorically speaking. It's not like it's actually spatially oriented. But there is a kind of a metaspatiality to it. The way I put it is each of these sort of experiential fields sort of seems to happen in its own dimension. They are where they are, and you can't say where that is in relation to where anything else is, but they don't get in each other's way. It's like your field of where's your hearing happening? Where's your field of sound happening? Well, it's where it is, but where is it in relation to your field of vision that's floating right here? Well, you can't say, but it's not in the way. It's somewhere where it is. It's here, but it's not blocking anything. It's sort of in its own little bandwidth or something. And the same sensation doesn't get in the way of touch. It's in its place. And all of experience happens like this. It's sort of very spread out. No experience actually impedes or touches any other experience. It's all very, very, very panoramically arrayed. Look and see. I think this is pretty easy to see, and it's actually possible and ultimately quite easy to see that thought, imagination, and even emotion are the same. When you're feeling a strong emotion, it doesn't actually block what you're seeing. It doesn't. It doesn't block what you're hearing.
Does the comment or does the summation of all the voices in the chorus equal the totality of your experience?
Yes, but having said that, there's not a finite number of voices, so it's.
Well, you keep naming the voices. What are the other voices?
Well, that's the point. You get to a point very, very rapidly where you can't. We have names for certain gross, obvious aspects of our experience. The sense fields, and we have names for mind, and may have names for emotion, and we may have names for whatever we have names for. We have names for it. But if you go looking in the actuality of experience, you'll discover vast fields that are just subtle vibes, or we just don't have words for what it is. There's no language that applies to these phenomena, but they're actualities.
And you don't feel those in as thought. Those aren't thought.
Well, you can sum them up as thought if you want. But having said that, you're just making thought do more duty, and that's fine. But the point is, you can't ever find an edge to any of it. You never get to a point where, well, that's as fine as it gets, and it doesn't get any finer. Because all of a sudden, if you get more subtle, all of a sudden, wow, there's more. It's a lot like deep space astronomy. In the last couple decades, I remember, when was it, I think of it as last year, which means it was probably 20 years ago. They focused the Hubble or some very high-powered telescope on a portion of the sky that they thought had absolutely nothing in it. A specific portion of the sky out of the galactic plane, in between all known stars, where basically on most astronomy plates there was nothing. It was like a tiny little square of blackness. It was like, just infinitesimally small relative to the full panorama of, say, a half sky. And they focused a very long exposure on that. And in this exposure, they saw literally countless galaxies, each of which, of course, consisted of billions and billions of stars. And this is in a spot of sky that basically looks like nothing, literally looks like just empty space. And our experience is a lot like that, in my experience. And I think you can, play with this and explore it for yourself, and I think you'll probably discover the same thing. It's impossible to look anywhere in your experience and find nothing.
It's infinitely deep.
Yes,
yeah.
Infinitely deep, infinitely subtle. And even the words deep and subtle lose their meaning when you get beyond a certain point pretty early on. I mean, you get to a point where it's so unqualifiable, it's laughable. I mean, you can't think about it, or it's indescribable because it's indescribable.
That's the unbounded part.
Yeah. And it doesn't end. It just doesn't end. It doesn't. Ending is just irrelevant. It's not a relevant categorization. But the point is to discover this directly, to be with your experience, be with the actuality of what is present, and let it show you what it is, rather than trying to find some ultimate way of category. Even that it is unbounded and all that is basically irrelevant. I mean, I'm just sitting here saying that and asserting that, which is like, it sounds good, but check it out for yourself. See what you find, and what you ultimately will find is mind-bogglingly cool, basically, and you won't be able to say what it is, but finding it is profoundly valuable and beautiful, and you can decide for yourself whether or not the term unbounded in any way hints at it, which is, of course, irrelevant. Yeah.
So what you find cannot be known.
It cannot be known semantically, it cannot be known analytically, it cannot be known definitionally, but it is most profoundly known in its being, because being is knowing.
But you can never fix what it is. I mean,
No.
You can't really arrive at what it is.
Well, you don't need to arrive at it because you already are. I mean, you already experience all of your experience. We're used to sort of not noticing areas of our experience that we can't think about or talk about. I would say, generally speaking. And areas of our experience that are too subtle, or just basically weird or non-eventful, or not that don't exist in a human meaningful context, just little weird flickerings or what have you. We typically don't pay much attention to them because we can't incorporate them into our usual sort of bread and butter exchanges and narratives and what we're doing and thinking we're doing and so on. But these qualities are there, and in the fact of their being there, they're actual, they are present in experience. And if they're present in experience, they're being known, because the very existence of experience is a knowing. You could say consciousness knows experience, or reality knows itself, and that's what experience consists of. So, for example, if you see something, even if you don't know what it is, in the fact of seeing it, you are knowing it. You may not know what it is, you may not know it analytically, but there's a knowing just simply in its presence. And so likewise, anything, no matter how subtle or, let's say, abstract from a human point of view, can appear experientially, is being known just in that apparition. And this is actually a really important point, because
So it's indefinable.
yeah, sure, absolutely.
Indefinable knowledge.
Yes. But as you discover this, you discover that all knowledge is indefinable, and even the knowledge we're used to thinking of as definable, we have erroneously qualified as such, because it's actually indefinable too. And this is the power of this. We discover that indefinability is the condition that exists across the board, and nothing else exists, which pulls the plug on all our definability, which it turns out is where all our problems were created. What we think we are and what we think's going on is what causes all our suffering, and it's all inaccurate. It's all actually undefinable. And we can discover this directly through playing with this knife edge of definability versus undefinability. And as we become more familiar with undefinability, which most of us typically don't spend much time giving much attention to, because we're much more interested in what seems to be definable, we build up some chops, we develop some skill at appreciating undefinability as it is, and then when we redirect our attention back towards what we're used to thinking of as definable, lo and behold, whoa, where'd my world go? I mean, this is the really surprising fact, is that nothing is what we think it is. It's not that it is something else, it's just not what we think it is. It's something entirely other. Even exactly what we think, even everything that we think of as completely normal, we think we have a handle on, is entirely not that way. You know, everything we think as definable or referenceable and so on is actually not, in actuality. And this being the case, it's discoverable that that's the case, and that's a very powerful reorienting technique, let's call it.
So you're saying that whatever you think you know is more or less, presumed like constructions or
yes, exactly so.
Yeah. Presentations.
Yeah. Hypotheses. Hypotheses taken as if they were true. They might be true, they could be true, they just happen to not be. Yeah.
Is definability arbitrary? I mean to say.
Yeah, basically. I mean, it's just a matter of, definability is a matter of believability, and believability is a kind of a matter of suggestibility.
I mean, we've sort of decided these things are definable, and out here is not, but could we not just as easily have decided these things are definable, trumped up some definitions of those?
Sure, arguably, that would create a radically different sort of a semantic system, but I suppose that's possible. But anytime you have any kind of definability that denies infinity, i.e. that denies inclusiveness, a this different than a that, you're going to be in trouble. Because in actuality there's no such thing. In reality there's no this that is different, can be found to be different than a that, believe it or not. And you can discover this very directly. As long as you live in a world where there's a this which can be differentiated from a that, you're living in a world which is not real. You're living in a world which is imaginary. I'm afraid we have to quit on that note, because it's quitting time and poor Porter has to go home. So good night, online people.